Hello there, sports fans. This is Joe Dunt transmitting from Towanda, and in the back, if everything was right, we'd be seeing the courthouse behind me. Anyhow, I'm reflecting on 9/11 and my recollections after 20 years, and it's really an interesting reflection from my own standpoint because prior to 9/11, I was at a party somewhere and we were talking about the World Trade Centers and the possibility of having a problem or being dangerous to work in. And I said to everybody, I said, look, I said, if I just traveling there is no big deal. You go in there, you go out. The risk of something happening like a fire or something and dying as a result of a fire is pretty minute. But you work there every day and over 20 or 30 years, chances are you're going to have a fire, and it's possible that the fire suppression system might not work, and you could have a real problem there getting out. And this was after the bombing of the World Trade Centers in 1993, which the FBI actually oversaw. New York Times accused the FBI of creating and getting these terrorists all excited to do things, getting them to do it, getting them fired up to do it, finding volunteers to do it, and catching them right in the brink of time, so they could go to Congress and say, "Look, we want more money. Look at the great job we're doing." Well, they did this in 1993 to the point where they got a Egyptian military man to be the go-between man between the FBI and the terrorists. They were trying to solicit to blow up the World Trade Center, not totally blow it up, but get to the point where they could blow it up. And the our go-between, the Egyptians, said, "Hey, when are you going to replace the real explosives with fake explosives? Powder or something?" He said, "Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that." So after they detonated this truck in the basement of the World Trade Center, one of them, they tried to frame this Egyptian guy. Fortunately, the Egyptian guy had the good reason not to trust our FBI, and he had tapes of all the conversations. So he said, "This is nice that you think I did something wrong here, but I was working for the government." Of course, you don't hear about this in the major news. New York Times, I think, covered it, but it's very, very strange. Anyhow, so I just want to give you a little more on that. And so, like I said, if I told my friends at the party that if I was going to be working in the World Trade Center for a lifetime, I'd have a ballistic parachute system under my desk. And if something happened, I had to get out. I'd just break one of those windows or something and fire it out there and escape. I don't think I'd sell it to anybody. So anyhow, that was my thoughts about escaping from the World Trade Center. As it turns out, had they had cables and ran cables diagonally between the buildings or whatever to other buildings, they could have had harnesses. You just grab it, put the harness on, and clip it to the cable, and you slide down. But they still don't have that, and that would have been a viable way to get out. And I got a lot of stories about a guy who was blind, and the seeing eye dog got him out, and a lot of very heartwarming stories about that whole thing. Anyhow, so prior to this 9/11, I had a real apprehension as far as flying. I've never had that before or since. I said, "This is my numbers up. I'm not getting in a plane to fly down to Nashville. I'm going to drive. I can drive. I know I can drive it." So um, that morning, I drove and headed towards Nashville. As this thing unfolded, as I was driving through Pennsylvania, I was living in New Jersey. And I'll get back to that because the night before, I happened to be in New York City driving some vocal competition judges back to New York City. And my mother had a vocal competition, the Violetta DuPont vocal competition at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which has been on a sabbatical because of the COVID thing. I think next year they're going to have it in April or something. But anyhow, so I drop the people off. I'm heading back, and I hear this story about a guy who his name was Patrick Dolan Crichton, 54. He was arrested the night before that night. At least that night they were reporting it. They claim it was on 9/11, but no, it was 9/10 when I heard it. He was charged with the 1971 hijacking an Air Canada flight from Thunderbird, Toronto. Apparently, they had robbed a bank, they had killed somebody, and they took the plane down to Cuba. And the only reason why they caught him is because someone did some searches on the internet. They found he was teaching in New York City. He was a teacher. So how he got back and how there was no problem with him getting a job, to me, I'm thinking to myself on this story, this is before 9/11. I said, this is a real security breach. I said, this is crazy. I mean, no one seems to care how this guy got in. Now, I understand that if you really want to get in this country, you can get in this country. You can rent a boat, take an outboard motor from Cuba to here, whatever. But to get a job and pass security, you're around kids and all this sort of stuff, you wonder how the hell did he pull this up? They never discuss that. They still won't discuss it, but that's another thing. So anyhow, that was the story on that. Now, after this thing happened, Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, I think he was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff or something. He visited the Pentagon, and he wanted to visit his buddies down there, see if he could help. And one of his the guys who worked for him at the time said, "You got to see this. You got to see this." He had a list of all the countries that they wanted to invade and take over in the next 5 years, which started, I guess, in Libya, Syria, and then worked its way to Iran. And apparently we're going to go after Iraq. And he said, "Why are we attacking Iraq?" And the general in there said, "I don't know. I have no reason." He said, "Do we have information that they're involved?" I said, "No, there's nothing to indicate that." So if you get a chance, get on the internet and look up General Wesley Clark and 9/11. You'll get a mouthful. Now, the other thing that was very interesting is that during 9/11, they happened to be holding a drill, which meant they scrambled all the radar, they jammed everything. They made it impossible to simulate. They simulated an attack. And it did such a great job on that we couldn't actually direct fighter planes after the airliners or figure out which airliners were actually in distress or if they really were in distress or was this part of the drill. If you look at history, whenever there's any mass shootings or whatever, there's always a drill going around someplace. Okay, but in this case, I mean, there's like what 364 and a quarter days in a year is a 365. Anyhow, including leap year or whatever. Anyhow, out of all those days, it just so happened that they were running this drill when they needed security the most while we're being attacked. I mean, it's almost comical more than sad. This also was the 10th year, exactly 10 year today, before George Bush Sr. Was talking about the New World Order. What a wonderful thing it would be. And he happened to be in New York at the business meeting, and he worked as a consultant or something for the Bin Laden family. And George Bush, our president's brother, was working in the security and had a lot of free time during off hours in the World Trade Center, which is another issue which we'll talk about. The other thing is Building 7, which had nothing to do with the two buildings that were hit. Some debris did fly into it, but the whole building came down in a controlled crash hours later. In fact, they announced it going down before it went down, like it was choreographed. And they have videotape of the owner of the building saying, "Pull it. Pull it" means you're gonna take it down with controlled charges. So it's very interesting. The other situation is that these guys who hijacked these planes, they had taken previous flights on the same route. and they took it first class. I don't know if any of you people have flown first class, but let me tell you, fly first class. I've only done it by accident because they were overbooked. And the pilot comes out and he wines and dines the passengers. He tells them jokes, asks them trivia questions and stuff, and really wants to make them feel like $1 million because those are the guys who are actually paying for the flight. The rest of us slobs are barely paying for the gasoline and the depreciation on the airplane. So anyhow, so they were familiar. These pilots were familiar with the people who killed them. All right. So that way they paid cash. All right. And the other thing is the selection of the airports. Apparently, Newark and Boston. I don't know about Washington, but at least the other two were noted for being very lax in security. And it just so happens they used the government's information, or the report system, or whatever it was, the FAA or whoever issued those reports. That was a good tip if you want to hijack a plane, you go to the airports that have the worst track record. So there's a lot of crazy things like the hole that was punched into the Pentagon. It was far smaller than the fuselage of the plane that went into it, and there were no marks from the engines that would have hit the wall too. So you're saying that matter of fact, the windows weren't even broken where the wings would have hit the windows. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and they only released maybe one video of this whole thing. They had hundreds of apparently video shots of this thing. They could have set our mind at ease. They didn't want to set our mind at ease. The theory is it might have been a cruise missile that went into that damn thing. Who knows? But we're not gonna get to the bottom of why it happened, how it happened, why they didn't want people to know that the people who actually were the pilots were Saudi Arabians, um, bored rich kids who had nothing better to do and decided they would make history or something. Um, it was only Trump that got that information out, and there's more on that probably that we will ever know. But anyhow, that is my connection with 9/11 from a standpoint. I discussed with somebody about what I would do if I worked in the World Trade Center. I told you about when the FBI themselves tried to blow the thing up, or at least get it to the point where they could have blown it up, and then they were going to catch everything and the miracle and avert the tragedy. But you can't trust the FBI. In fact, when you have a president, which happened to have been Obama, um, boy, President Obama basically was raised by commies. He appointed a commie to head the FBI, which is James Comey, who voted for Gus Hall, a communist candidate, and then he appointed John Brennan, who also happened to vote for John Brennan that same year he was running for president. And no one in the FBI or the CIA said anything. In fact, John Brennan, within a year after, and this is by his own admission, within a year after voting for Gus Hall, he decided to change his curriculum of his studies so he'd be more hireable by the CIA. Now, if that's not a good comrade, I don't know who the hell is. We are dealing with the Communist Party in China. If you know anything about the Communist Party, not all atheists are communists, but you have to be an atheist to be a communist. Your allegiance is to your government, your movement, your cause. Anything else doesn't matter. We had a guy who came to our high school, I guess when I was a senior, and he was dressed up like the Quaker Oat guy, and he gave the spiel. It was amazing. And at that time he was talking about our social security system. The money has already been spent. They didn't bank it away. But anyhow, getting back to the Chinese threat, which is really amazing. In fact, we hate Russia more now than we did when we were aiming nuclear weapons at each other and really provoking each other. It's almost as if there's so many commies in our government that they consider the Russians as traitors. You hear what I'm saying? Because they're no longer communists. But yeah, this whole COVID thing is very scary, and apparently we don't care if the Chinese launched a bio weapon on us. We don't even want to know. We don't care. And right now they got people convinced they got to take boosters and boosters and boosters. There's never going to be the end of this thing because they never came up with a flu vaccine that worked. And the more you use the flu vaccine, apparently the more susceptible you are to getting the flu if you don't have the vaccine. And this is probably going to be the same case with this COVID thing. They don't care about the natural immunity. They don't care about even if you have COVID, they still want to sell you another shot. Young kids are dying from these shots, and it's amazing to prove that you died of COVID. Anything. It didn't matter if you got hit by a car, you shot yourself in the brain, you jumped off a building. It was a COVID death. It was incredible. And then if someone dies from the vaccine within so many days of the vaccine, they don't want to know about it. Oh, I had nothing to do with that. I had nothing to do with it. That had nothing to do. It's like a double standard of cause and effect. And then when you're talking about vaccinating young kids who have very low chance of dying from the COVID and they're taking the risk of getting all frigged up, this is insanity. This is totally insanity. And the worst part about it, the very worst part about it, is that they don't want to give us access to ivermectin or the HCQ and the protocols that will allow there's 100,000 doctors out there that are treating people for this, so that they have a very, 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 very good chance of surviving it. But they don't want survival. They want body counts. Do you understand that? Now they're talking about if you don't have a vaccination, they won't treat you. They'll let you die. Well, they're doing that now. They tell you to go home when they know you have it and wait till you can't breathe and then come back to the hospital. Then they run these clinical trials on HCQ and ivermectin. And they wait till the patients are like on death's edge. Their lungs are all frigged up. And then they overdose them with some of this stuff. I know in the HCQ, they were giving them 2 or 3 times the recommended dosage at the end stage of life. And they say, oh, it doesn't work. The idea is to give it to these people and you send them home and have them take some of the stuff and see how they do. But no, this is a very sinister. I don't care what you say. This is a sinister thing going on. And when you look at all the cancer cases from these medications that the FDA has approved, and now these people are dying from all kinds of cancers and stuff. Look, if you trust them, you're crazy. There's no real talk about vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, a healthy lifestyle, getting out in the sun. And the poor blacks, it's incredible. The poor blacks, they need vitamin D. They need vitamin D. And this is a disclaimer. I'm not trying to be a doctor. I'm not suggesting anything. But I think the blacks should really get it together and ask their mayors why they are being allowed to die and not offered vitamin D so they could double their chances of surviving COVID. Is that asking for too much? But you got to follow the money. Does Big Pharma want the average American to be healthy? Do they really why would they want us to be healthy? Why would Social Security want us to live any longer than we have to? If we were a good patriot, we'd drop dead the next day after we retired, after our income stream cut out. And that's following the money, and you better believe there's something to that in almost any situation. Anyhow, God bless you. Let's see if this thing actually gets up on the internet. I guess tomorrow's no, today's 9/11. Okay, so this is the 20th year, and actually it's the 30th year of the world order that Bush Sr. was talking about. And another thing I want to talk about is when they talk about Vladimir Putin, they talk about being the head of the KGB, no good Nick. And it's interesting that our president, George Bush, was the head of the CIA. Now, the CIA kills a lot of people too. They're known for overthrowing countries and having people assassinated. But when we do it, it's good. It's very good. And then when the Russian wipes out a defector, somebody who jeopardized Russia, and they go over to England, they try to take him out. That's like a bad thing. The Israelis do it all the time. When someone frigs with the Israelis, they take them out. They don't care where they are, where they're going, who they are. If you mess with Israel, the Mossad will take you out. Period. And the Russians have the same type of fair play. In the United States, we let spies out who did all kinds of things and killed all kinds of our people. But then again, look at the people who are going to get killed in Afghanistan. So anyhow, I'm glad I voted for Mr. Donald Trump. God bless him. We didn't know how well we had it. And unfortunately, most of the people who voted against him will never understand how good we had it. And that's a form of I don't know what. I mean, look, it's a free country, but when they stopped using paper backup to prove how the machines actually performed, that should have been a sign. And people worried about this, the whole credibility. You know what they said? We can't use paper because we'll be killing trees and ruining the environment. Isn't that terrible? Of course, they said that about the oil caravans. The Russians were blowing the hell out of the oil caravans that the ISIS and everybody were stealing oil and selling it to Europe through, I guess, the son of Turkey, president of Turkey, and they started asking, why aren't we blowing up the caravans? Because we said we can't do that. That's environmentally very, very bad. We can't do that. So finally, they got embarrassed, and what they did is they dropped leaflets over the caravan they were going to bomb. They said, we're going to come back in an hour and blow up these trucks, so you better get out of the trucks. Isn't that a way to win a war? And yet another thing I want to bring up is that it was Obama that ramped up the drone usage. I mean, considerably. And it wasn't like he wanted to kill the enemy, because he loves the enemy. He loves the Muslims. But he wanted to piss people off. And the more people innocent people he was able to kill with our drones, the more enemies we made. I mean, if someone killed my son or daughter who was innocent with a drone, let me tell you, I would sacrifice my life in a second to get revenge, okay? And that's what they did. And this went on and on and on and on. And at the very end, what did Biden do? He used another drone. He killed a bunch of kids. So I don't know how many Americans are going to get out. But if I was one of the parents of one of those kids, man, I wouldn't have too much sympathy with the Americans that are still there. It's unbelievable. We got a senile president that has never been good. He's always been on his $200,000 salary. He's become a very multi millionaire. I wonder how he did that. I guess his wife was frugal or something. I can expect it to be so. Anyhow, hang in there. I don't know what the future is, but fortunately for me, I'm 72, going on 73. So at least I have a little time that they can't take away from me. But you younger pups, God help you. God, stand up, stand proud. I'll try to stand up and stand proud for you, but we got problems. We really do. Take care.